Welcome to the We Are Wake Tech podcast with your host, Wake Tech President, Dr. Scott Ralls.
Hi, I'm Scott Ralls, host of the We Are Wake Tech podcast. We're excited to share with you today a special episode of We Are Wake Tech as we're joined by Raleigh's own Wall Street Journal reporter and best-selling author of the great new book, Devil at His Elbow, Valerie Bauerlein. Join us as we celebrate with our students and question and answer this conversation with this great Raleigh author. Thanks for joining us in this special episode of We Are Wake Tech. How is everybody? Well, who has it better than us at Wake Tech? I mean, it is a beautiful day. If you look at the leaves when you go out, we've got coffee, we've got breakfast, and we've got Raleigh's own, Wake County's own Valerie Bauerlein, who is a best-selling author, well-known journalist, and it is so wonderful to have you with us today, Valerie, to share your insights. And we have so many of our great students and faculty here at Wake Tech that are looking forward to ask you questions, learn from you. Thank you for being with us today.
No, thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here. And you're right, driving in this morning, it was just gorgeous. I was like, wow, what a great morning, and I'm so glad to be here with y'all.
Yeah, this is a great day. So thank you all for joining us today. So let's jump right into it. Before we talk a little bit about the book, because we want to hear more and more about the book and your process in getting to the book. But you know, for many of our students right now, they are starting a journey. They're in a process of a journey to where they're going next, whether that's to university or whether that's a career. Can you talk to us about your journey? You made it to, being this well-known national journalist, living here in Raleigh, but can you kind of walk us through how you got to that place?
I've been at the Wall Street Journal for 20 years. And I was based in Atlanta for a number of years until our kids were little. And it was important to be around family. So the Journal let me move back to Raleigh, where my sisters and family live. And I've been here now for several years and gotten to know Dr. Ralls and gotten to write this book.
There's a lesson there, because sometimes what you intend initially is not necessarily where you always end up. I went to college to become a journalist. That was my goal. I wrote for the Asheville Citizen-Times in high school, went to UNC, wrote for the Daily Tar Heel, and then a year in decided I really love this, but not so much that I think it's going to be my career.
But so I tell young students all the time, if you try journalism or if you try writing, and you're going to use your writing in whatever you do. Mm-hmm. That ability to communicate clearly, to synthesize and communicate clearly is going to serve you well. So I encourage you to write as much as you can.
I want to ask you about writing a book, but before, talking about writing, some people say now, that we don't pay enough attention to it because we don't write long form anymore. Mm-hmm. But I kind of noticed that for a lot of employers last night, they see writing and the ability to write and communicate as maybe more important than ever because more people struggle with it.
Yeah, it's hard. And they struggle because it's hard, but it's so important because if you can clarify your thinking to express in clear writing, that means you've done the thought work to get it down on paper too. So no, I think it's a terrifically important skill.
So in talking about something that's hard, to me, thinking about writing a book just seems daunting. It just seems like so much work and effort. It's almost like maybe it feels like you've been a sprinter as a journalist and then having to run a marathon. Well, I'm putting words in your mouth. No. Describe that process of writing a book. It just seems intimidating.
It really it is hard. I told my husband not too long ago, I'm thinking about what I might write another book about, and he put his head in his hands and he's like, you've forgotten what it was like, because it really is hard. And Dana Trent is here, and she wrote a great book, and memoir is hard to pull off. It's hard to be honest with yourself and true to all the characters. But it really is. I've been a reporter for 30 years, and I got into reporting because I like to write. But over the years, I found that I really like talking to people, and if I haven't been out in the field on assignment doing something, seeing the world, for a week or two, I get really itchy feet. So over the years, I became really enamored of reporting, and I work for the Wall Street Journal, where voice is very uniform. We want you to read the Wall Street Journal and it to sound like the Journal, not like me or you or an individual. That was the biggest challenge that you mentioned, is making the transition from reporter mind and telling it very, very straight to book mind. Because we look to books and movies and works of art really to make meaning out of what happened out of an event. We call journalism the first draft of history. We're telling you the best version of what we know today about what happened this morning or yesterday. But books, especially nonfiction books, are trying to add up, what does it tell you the story, but then tell you what it means? What can we take away from it? And that was hard for me, and a real challenge to try to express that, yes, this is a very interesting true crime story, but it is actually a history of the South. And it's about race and class and the way that power works in places where it's concentrated in one family or group. And it was hard for me to have the courage to say that. So it's very meaningful whenever I see it in someone's hands that they're reading it.
Was Devil at His Elbow the first book you've written?
Yes.
Really?
Yes. Devil at His Elbow is the first book I've written. So I'm an overnight success.
I was going to say, that's like your first hit being a grand slam to win.
I thought you were going to say, is The Devil at His Elbow my first title? Because if you open the book, if you have a copy of it, there are these, they're parts. So there's chapters, but there are also parts. And so if you get a chance to open it at one point, the parts are the ghosts of titles past. So The Devil at His Elbow was about my 10th title.
And I remember reading the book, but as we get into it, remind us where the title came from.
The title, The Devil at His Elbow, is from a quote by Cormac McCarthy, who was the great writer of
One of my favorite
of the American
authors,
West. And he wrote a book called Blood Meridian. And there was a quote in there where he said, there's meanness in the least of creatures, but when God made man, the devil was at his elbow, a creature who could do anything. And I loved it. The titles that I was thinking of were, the leading one for a while was The Prince of Hampton County. And I loved that title because Alex Murdaugh was the prince of this family, the fourth generation of this powerful family. And I love the idea that he's the Prince of Hampton County. The place is so critical to the story. But when I turned in the book, they said, we need a title that's bigger. And in the end, The Devil at His Elbow was a title that I liked and the publisher liked because it gets to the vastness of the system. It's not just about Alex Murdaugh, it's about the whole web that he came out of. So.
This book was a first for me. Now, I read a lot. That's one of my favorite things to do is read books. And this book was a first because a lot of times when I read books and then I think my wife would enjoy a book, I give it to her. Sometimes they just end up sitting over there. She doesn't, but this one she read immediately, and then I took it to my mother and she read it within 2 weeks. So it is floating around among my cousins somewhere. But it is just moving fast. And I'm sure if you all read the book, if you hadn't yet, it is a nonfiction book, but it reads like a novel because it's just such a fascinating story. One of the things that I think was so fascinating about your telling of this story, which you can go on TV and see different telling, you can read different places about it, but it is a truly sensational story, but you captured that it's a story beyond just these events in themselves in modern time. It's a story of place and the geography and the low country. It's also a story of generations that built to this moment. Yeah. And how did you, when you started, I know you saw the story, but it took you places, or did you already know about that? How did that come about?
No, I grew up in the South, and I started and have always worked in the South and at small papers to start with, and it was familiar to me, y'all. And if any of y'all from a small town, and I bet a lot of y'all are, or your family came from, Eastern North Carolina, I recognize that dynamic. And when I was younger, I covered politics in South Carolina, which is very different to here. South Carolina is much smaller. It has one law school for all intents and purposes, and a lot of the legislators go to that law school, know each other, and then go home to their communities and I was familiar with the power dynamics in South Carolina. So when this happened, I'm a Wall Street Journal reporter. I never really considered covering a big true crime case, and this was on the cover of People magazine because, Alex Murdaugh, his wife and son were killed in June of 2021 in the middle of the night on a country estate. Nobody knew what happened, no suspects. And then over the course of the summer of 2021, we find out, wait a second, the housekeeper fell down the stairs, or was she pushed, and maybe there's money missing. And then by Labor Day, I don't know if y'all remember this, but he tried to commit suicide on the side of the road by having somebody shoot him. So it was just like this sensational Baroque story. But I knew I'd been to Hampton County as a younger reporter. I'd done a story there. Jim Clyburn, who was the longtime congressman and House Minority Leader for a long time, had challenged me. He's like, if you want to understand South Carolina, you need to go do a story in Hampton County because it is so isolated and removed, and people are in such need there. So all this was happening, and my promise to the publisher was like, because I sold the proposal for the book, which is kind of how this works. You write a proposal, and then publishers consider it, and if they're interested in, they'll buy it. And my promise to them is like, if no one is ever charged with the deaths of Maggie and Paul Murdaugh, there is a story in this family. And I don't know if y'all have watched Yellowstone, the TV show Yellowstone, but when the world is small, and we were talking about this earlier, when I was in Columbia, South Carolina, a reporter in that same market, a friend of mine, is a guy named Craig Melvin, who's now at the Today Show. And so Craig invited me to come on the Today Show and talk about the book. And he said, Val, this story is the redneck Yellowstone. But it really is. If you go back, I try to tell you about Alex's great-grandfather and how he built the system, his grandfather and how he perfected the system and made it fearsome, and then his father, and then Alec. I'm trying to explain to myself and to readers that this is a petri dish that cultivated this person, and there's a story about it, this place, regardless. And for a while I had to prove it because I sold the book in October of 21, and Alec wasn't charged until July of 22. So I really did dig in on the history for a long time.
It seems like almost one of those real life stories that if you wrote it as a novel, they might push back and say it's not fully believable because it was so, and it had so many layers to it.
Well, and you're not supposed to read the comments. That's the number one thing that people tell you. But I don't know if Dana has or not. But like Goodreads is such a powerful. I don't know if y'all are familiar or go on Goodreads, but it's such a like reader to reader community of recommending books to one another. And when I first wrote the book, my sisters read it, my husband read it, my parents read it, and they thought it was good, right? I was like, okay, but do other people do people that don't know me? And so Goodreads became this barometer to me, and I do read the reviews. I want to see what the feedback is, good, bad, or indifferent. And someone said the other day, if this was fiction, I would have put it down as too fantastical. But it's not. It's stranger than fiction, and I felt an obligation to tell it that way, because you can't make this stuff up.
And I'm curious about your process. Was it the trial and the news of the trial, and you're covering it, and then you just keep uncovering like other things that happened around it, and then you uncovered the history? Is that how it evolved?
It sort of flipped because I had 2 years to write the book. So I spent from October until the spring of 22, October 21 to spring of 22, really digging in on the history and trying to understand the generations and to prove, these discrete examples of corruption, things that we suspect. By then we knew that Alec had done. We knew he started being charged with stealing from his very, very poor personal injury clients, motherless children and a deaf quadriplegic teenager. We knew that he was a deeply bad person. So I was trying to find evidence in the past. Well, how did this come to be? Was there a history of that type of behavior in the family? So I was working on that, and then, but then also trying. It's almost like, and y'all are studying stories, but there was an A timeline, which is today, the current, and then there was a B timeline, and I had to kind of split my time between understanding the history, the B timeline, and then also keeping up with the A timeline, getting to know the law enforcement officers, the lawyers, the people that knew the family, and then culminating in the trial. So I went to the trial, which you may remember is 6 weeks down in Walterboro, South Carolina, and then got a huge amount of information that helped build out that current timeline in the book.
Is it fair to assume that your experience in the region, the South, allowed you to write a story that no one else really wrote about this story? Do you think that's fair?
I think, and I could say too, I couldn't write this story about Colorado or California or a place that I haven't lived. But I've done a lot of events in the South, and in small towns, or older readers will come up to me and they'll say, I grew up in a town like this. I knew a family like that. But then in towns like Raleigh or Charlotte, people y'all's age will come up to me and say, like, I didn't grow up in a town like that, but I knew a kid like Paul. I knew a kid that came from an entitled background. So I think there was a familiarity with the South and my desire to make it a main character in the book that I could not have pulled off anywhere else. And it may be the case that somebody else, there have been many, many projects from people that were not from the South on this. I think mine was the 7th book to come out, and but I do think I had a perspective that others don't, and that's part of y'all's superpower. You understand where you're from and how it makes you who you are too.
And you had that perspective. What surprised you the most? Because there were so many twists and turns along the way. Are there some aspects of it that just shocked you, surprised you as you found them? What were some of those?
Oh, I would call my editor and be like, "You're not gonna believe what I just found out." And the one that stood out to me the most was, I was really spoiled for choice, y'all, because this family was very corrupt. There are a lot of things they did in the past 150 years that are pretty breathtaking. But Alex Murdaugh's great-grandfather was the start of this legal dynasty. He founded a law firm in 1910. He became the lead prosecutor in 1920 for 100 miles. And that was in the day where a small county like Hampton would have a sheriff and a part-time deputy and a jailer that lived over the jail. So for 5 counties, he was the law. He would go investigate the murders. He would decide whether you were drunk when you crashed your car. He was the law from 1940 to 1986. From 1910 to 1940. But like everyone else in the rural South, he lost everything. Not just when the banks failed in the 20s, but before that, when the cotton bowl came through in the 19-teens, and the economy was ruined. So he had been this powerful, rich man, lost everything, and was, I knew from newspaper reports, was very ill. He was missing court all the time because he had had a massive heart attack in court. He had renal failure, so he needed to be on dialysis, but it didn't exist at that point, so he was like dying very slowly. And it had always been rumored that the night he died, he was killed when his car went up on a train tracks, and he was killed by a freight train coming, 90 miles an hour this way, or however fast they were going. And it was always like, was it an accident? Did his car stall out on the train tracks, or did he mean to do it? And I was able to prove that he knew he did it. He knew what he was doing. He was dying. It was the hottest day of the summer. It was July. It's 2 a.m. He's on our way home from the poker game. He pulls up on the train tracks just shy of it. And then at the last minute, I found the documentation from the engineers who said he pulled up on the train tracks, and not only did he not try to get out of the car, he was leaning out the window waving at us. And then the next day, his son turned around and sued the railroad for a record-setting amount of money that reestablished the family dynasty. And so that to me was like, all right, this actually was what happened. I have the documentation, and it set us up for understanding why Alex Murdaugh would think it was okay to try to kill himself on the side of the road to get an insurance settlement for his son to continue the dynasty. So it was those kinds of echoes that were the most
And it was that
surprising.
one little piece of that communication with the engineers that sort of, so The Devil at His Elbow talks about meanness, and I even remember my mother, she couldn't remember the title of the book, but she kept calling them the meanies, But there must have been, even within all of that, some of these people, was there any that were particularly you felt sympathetic to, that were,
Oh, 100%. No, I think, a lot of people have asked me, and the publisher asked me, well, this is a book about a very bad person. Who is the reader going to pull for? Because he's not we talk about an anti-hero. So in Mad Men or Breaking Bad, you're kind of pulling for Walter White and Don Draper against yourself. You like them in spite of yourself. Alex not that person. He's the main character of the book in many ways, but he's a craptastic human being. And so from the beginning, I had in my mind, who is trying to unwind this system? Who am I looking? Who are the people that are speaking up about it? And I actually found it very affirming. I have a lot of people that I'm still. I've texted probably this week with 4 of the different characters in this book about different things, and spoke to one of them this morning.
Oh, yeah.
So there are many people in the book, like Blanca Simpson, the housekeeper for the Murdaugh family. She loved the family. When Alec would hang up the phone with her, he'd say, "I love you, B, love you." But she saw some things that didn't add up in his story and testified about it at great risk. Shelley Smith, who was the night nurse for Alex's mom, Alec had tried to get her to say that he was at his mom's house longer than he actually was, and she was like, "That's not true." But she worked for him, and she was brave and said what she actually saw. So there were a number of people like that, and then we know that Alex stole something on the order of $10 million from the least of these people at their most desperate moment. They had either lost a loved one or become badly injured, and commonly in a car wreck. And he would sit at their hospital bed and like pat their hair and pat their hand and promise in tears, "I will take care of you, I'll take care of your loved ones," and go back to his office and rob them blind. And that was so poignant to me, and he could because the family was so powerful and so trusted. Nobody read the 100-page contract they were signing. You trusted the family. And I wanted to explain those stories too. So there are 3 different victims, financial victims, that I tried to tell you quite a bit about, and why they trusted him and what it felt like to be betrayed that way.
With a lot of our students, we talk about this, and for all of us, whatever happens in our past, our circumstances are not our destiny.
Yeah.
But it almost felt like with this family, for some reason, they couldn't get out of their destiny's way, if that's fair. They just fell into a living of a past as opposed to changing of a future.
I think that's true, but nor did they want to. But I think one of the things
you didn't really hear from any of them a desire to have it any differently
than it was, and quite to the contrary. Actually, I think that Alex Murdaugh went to such great lengths towards the end, when everything was falling apart, to keep that system going.
They enjoyed their privilege. They weren't going to.
But I do think, and y'all have studied it in your world history classes, this idea of dynasties, and it's not just like the Ming Dynasty in China or the royal family. You can look at the Ford family, American families. When on the 4th or 5th generation, if it is common for dynasties to collapse because they collapse under their own weight. You have children who inherit a mighty name and a business or a system, and then it rots from the inside. And I think that certainly is the case with Alec. He did not want to do the work he was making $1 million a year, but it wasn't enough. Right, and he needed to rob people, and he did because he could, and he did because he could because nobody was going to call him on it.
Mm-hmm. That seems fair to say that the dynasty has now collapsed, but is the story over?
The story is not over, because I think one of the things that was important to me is, we're here in Raleigh, but North Carolina is even more rural than South Carolina. More than 50% of the people in this state live in communities that are 2,500 people or less. We're very rural. And this rural-urban divide, we talk about it a lot, but it's real. And in South Carolina, there are so many places like Hampton County. There are 10 counties along that I-95 corridor that have very similar dynamics. They're very poor and disadvantaged, and it's a really tough place to live. So I think it is not over in the sense that even corrupt leadership is leadership. And when it collapses, it leaves the vacuum, and something comes in to fill the vacuum. And right now, it's been a huge amount of infighting between well-meaning people. There's a lot of missing money in Hampton County in the government administration. There's several $1 million that was supposed to go to building a big softball complex that has disappeared under past leadership. And so there's just, in a place that didn't have much to start with, there's a lot of infighting, and you can't keep track of who's on the county council because they run and then they quit because it's so frustrating. So no, it's not over, and I have great empathy. I was down there a couple weeks ago seeing some sources who I consider friends, and it's a tough place to live right now. So.
Did it surprise you that the corruption went back so far and was as deep as it was in a time of, we assume there's more transparency about these types of things?
Well, it's funny. Alex Murdaugh, used to say, "I wish I was born in Old Buster's time." That was his grandfather, because Old Buster, who was the head of the whole system from 1940 to 1986. So Roosevelt to Reagan, it's just an incredible amount of power and time. He could make And he used to brag about it. They had the lowest, they pulled the same number of people for DUI and had the lowest conviction rate. Because he would say, like, if you make a DUI go away for somebody, they remember it. And then they get on your jury and they give you a big award or whatever. But no, I think it just was this, one of the reason that Alec would say that, I wish I'd been born in Old Buster's time, is because of this supercomputer that's in your hand at all times. And that was what tripped him up, was modernity. In the end, he couldn't hide what he was doing anymore. It wasn't a piece of paper in a drawer that went away. It was these electronic records,
They could track where
video
he was.
of him going door to door in a hospital trying to make a homicide go away. And then the night of the deaths of Maggie and Paul, the last witness that the state put up was their digital expert. And he went through an 86-page timeline of every moment on Alex Murdaugh's phone and the family's phone and cross-pollinating everything. And he said, you can lie, but your phone can't lie. And so that's, it's surprising to me that it went on for so long, but it's not surprising to me that, and we all know it, if we delete something on our phone, there's a reason, right? I mean, and that was what caught him. That's what tripped him up.
Before we started, you were kind of quizzing us a little bit, Emmy, one of our associate dean in technology, about changes here with technology and AI. But I'm curious from your perspective, because it seems that the world of journalism has changed quite a bit. So how do you adapt to those changes? What is that like for you in the seat you're in?
Well, I mean, it's like you're building a plane while you're flying it. I don't know how to use these tools yet. We're trying to learn them, but you're also trying to incorporate them into your daily work. But a friend of mine who's our technology columnist at the Journal, her name is Joanna Stern, she's writing a book that's coming out in the spring, and she let AI hack her life. She let AI run her life for 6 months and then wrote about it. And she texted me the other day, she's like, how did you write your endnotes, my 30 pages of endnotes? She's like, how did you write your endnotes without AI? Because the book's only been out a year, but the technology is going so fast. So, the answer is, we're trying to incorporate AI into our reporting, into making us get through huge amounts of information and synthesize it faster, to use it to build out our storytelling. But we're trying to do it in a way that's true to our ethics, and also, in the meantime, I'd like to learn how to use it better. But I have to get my kids all the time. Will take my phone and be like, "Mom, let me do that for you." So it's tough. But I encourage y'all to take advantage of it. Try to use it, experiment with it, because it's only going to, as fast as it's taken over in the last 6 months, I feel like it's going to accelerate in what we can use it for, and then also our need to understand it.
Yeah. Let me just share a perspective of you that I have. That you seem very anchored and you're comfortable in where you are. So even in times of change, you're probably able to deal with those changes. You found a voice some way, who you are. And I think that's something we all strive for. Do you feel that about yourself? Or
I certainly feel that way about you.
I don't know about that. I felt that way about Dana Trent last year when she was doing this as well. She shared her voice, she found her voice, but you too, you're so authentic. But you seem comfortable in who you are and that seems to affect the positivity of your reporting and your storytelling.
That means a great deal to me. But some of y'all have kids. I have teenagers at home who constantly remind me I'm not as cool as as my PR might suggest. No, I feel like we were joking about this earlier. My daughter wants to go into biochemistry, partly because she has an incredible chemistry teacher. And someone asked me, like, aren't you relieved that she's not going into journalism? Because journalism, spoiler, it's a hard field to make a living in right now. We're in such transition. AI is moving so quickly. There are fewer of us. And no, I mean, I don't regret a day I spent in this job. It's not easy at all, but it beats working. I really feel that way. And you can, and whatever you end up doing, find aspects of it that you love and that you're passionate about. I'm working right now. If you get a chance, I've put the little postcards on the table back there, but I've been working on a true crime another one in South Carolina that's very important to me. And it's about a road rage killing on the side of the road north of Myrtle Beach. And it was South Carolina has a very strong stand your ground law, meaning strong self-defense law. So there was a road rage beef for 9 miles between these two guys. Guy A gets out of his truck, guy B stays in his truck and shoots 29 times through the windshield and kills the other guy. But the police are like, oh, he was standing his ground. It's self-defense. And we were able to uncover like all of these secret phone calls that show what you think is happening was not happening. Mm-hmm. And I'm as passionate about that story as I am about this one, because we need to understand what gun laws mean in our lives. And this is not just happening in South Carolina. In places that are adopting open carry, meaning you don't have to have a concealed weapon permit, you have more people carrying more guns in more places. And in places with stand your ground laws, and there's a shooting, the only witness is often the person that died. So I think it's really important, not just as an understanding of the rural or urban divide, but about gun policy as well.
It seems that your experience, you almost are suggesting that, well, this is my observation, but is that you kind of go from a perspective that there's always more to the story than what is right there on the surface.
I thank you for saying that. I do think there's always more to the story. And as I mentioned, there have been, at this point, I think 10 books. The Netflix documentary was the number one, about this case, was the number one program worldwide of 2023. People watched 3 billion minutes of it, streamed it. It's like thousands of years. So there was multiple documentaries. I was on 3 of the Datelines. There's multiple stories. I do feel like there's layers to stories, but also multiple lenses on a topic are really good. We all see things from different perspectives. We have different audiences. So I think I've read every book about the case and watched everything, and I think it's the more people minding the store, the better to me.
Is that the secret to great storytelling? Looking at it from different perspectives, telling it from, or what do you think makes the great storytelling?
We talk about. Oftentimes we talk about getting into a story is like getting into a house, right? You can go through the front door, not knocking, come in the front door. You can look through the window or open, or you go around the back, or stand across the street. They're just the more. I always think about it because it's a national perspective, right? That we have for the journal. How wide can your frame be? Mm-hmm. And then typically, how many people can you talk to? So for this book, I hired a fact checker, and I tried to. I just wanted to say something very simple at the beginning in the author's note that says the author talked to more than 200 people. So I made a list of every person I talked to, so I could show her, yes, I did talk to more than 200 people. And I made a list of every trip I took to South Carolina on a spreadsheet. And I remember going downstairs to talk to my husband. I was like, would you believe I spent 130 days in South Carolina and 4 months? Yes. And he said, I would have said 6 months. But I think that the hard part for me was that I could talk to people all day. I find us endlessly fascinating. Everyone's got a story to tell. And my editor finally said, pencil down, no more interviews. You need to write this dang book. So that was the hard part, is I could have kept reporting it because the more perspectives, the better. You get a fuller story. People challenge your thesis, and you have to figure out, well, what do I need to adapt here? So.
One last question I want to open it up to our students. But so you've obviously, reached such accomplishments now, best-selling author, Wall Street Journal reporter. What advice would you have given yourself 20 years ago?
I would have said, and I'm sorry if this sounds so corny, don't be in such a hurry. It's going to work out. That every job that I took and every step that I took helped me figure out getting to the next step. And I also would have said, relationships really matter. Every job I've ever gotten has been through a relationship, not through an advertised job. And so when if you have an internship and they say, stay in touch. And the world gets smaller the longer you're in it. So I think that's what I've said. Don't be in such a hurry, and stay in touch with the people that matter to you.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I often say I wish I had not worried as much about some of the things I worried about when I was younger, because you worry about the destination, but you can miss the journey along the way.
I was guilty of an even worse worry, which was worrying about what my peers were doing. Who was at the New York Times, and when I was at the Winston-Salem Journal or whatever, I compared myself to other people, when in the end I was a night cops reporter for 3 years. So I worked 4 to midnight Tuesday through Saturday with a scanner in my hand going out, and I could not have understood crime, a true crime, without that experience or what law enforcement does. So don't be like me. Don't be in a hurry. Don't compare yourself to others.
It's easy to say, but it's hard to do.
It's hard to do,
because you
yeah.
spend a lot of time looking at the side mirrors and the back mirror and not looking forward a lot of times.
That's true.
All right. What are you guys, questions for Valerie? This is a great opportunity to talk to one of the leading authors. And can you tell us your name and what you're studying? And then ask a question. And I'm going to repeat the question so for the podcasting. Was there a character that really had you stumped, I guess, was almost fooling you and then you found, repeat it again. Let me make sure.
Is there like a character or like an event in the book that really had you stumped?
Character event that stumped you?
That really stumped me. I would say the question that really stumped me is the Wall Street Journal reporter in me was like, where is the money? He stole $10 million from people, and there was so much of it that was unaccounted for. I wanted to solve that, and I got as far as I could. But y'all, it is not an exaggeration to say that there's money buried, cash buried in PVC pipe in the ground in Moselle, because I've seen people dig it up. I mean, you cannot bury a large amount of cash. It's not possible in the elements and all that stuff. But there's some money that's buried. I think there's money that's still missing. The feds can account for about $6 million. So the two things that really keep me stumped are where's the money and did he have help? Did Alex Murdaugh have help cleaning up the murder scene or getting rid of the guns? That was very much a sticking point with the jury. They never found the two guns that were used to kill Maggie and Paul. And so, and that was one that almost led them not to convict. So those were the two questions for me that have me stumped to this day that I still would like to solve. Where's the rest of the money, and did he have help cleaning up? But thank you. Oh, sorry, you call.
Go ahead. We'll come right back. Hey, hang on one second. We got two. We got one up top. We'll go boom, boom, boom.
I'm sorry, that was my fault.
Sorry. No, you're fine. Go ahead. We'll get you up top first. Shout it out so we can hear.
Sorry.
That's fine.
I just wanted to know, like, the process of trying to figure it out. Was it more straight? Was it more work for you to do than actually writing a book? Or pretty much, I just want to know which one was more fun. Actually trying to figure it out or writing.
The writing versus the investigation.
Yeah, which was more fun, the trying to figure it out or the writing of it? Gosh, I would say the figuring out was the part that came more naturally to me. I had an editor that called me and he's like, Val, I know you well enough. I worked for him for a long time. He said, you got into the business because you wanted to write, which is true. He said, but then you built your reporting muscle and it's way stronger than your writing muscle right now. He's like, you're gonna have to get over that and exercise this muscle. So the reporting part of it is the part that I do every day and I know how to do, but the writing part of it, it's kind of crazy. My book editor said to me, she said, when I turned it in, she said, I always spend most of my time in the first 60 pages of the book. I was like, why is that? And she goes, well, by the time you get about 60 pages in, you know what you're doing. So as I got a little bit further into the writing, I felt I enjoyed it more because there were things that I wanted to say. I went with the jury. I was the reporter that went with the jury to Moselle to tour it, and I was able to describe that. It's one of my favorite chapters in the book. So when I pick up the book and read through different sections, it's the what I get some joy out of are the parts that I think that I remember enjoying writing or thinking, well, that says it the way I'd like to say it.
Can I ask you a question about that process? Because working with editors and feedback, that can be tough for
Oh, gosh.
So, I think that's almost a lesson for all of us is that it's helpful to have editors in our lives who give us straight feedback.
Oh my gosh, there's no good piece of journalism I've ever written that didn't owe 50% of it to a good editor. But it's still, I wonder about Dana, but like to this day, after 30 years, when I send a piece of writing off to New York to be edited, I feel like crawling under my desk because I'm like, at this point, is it good? Is it lame? How much editing does it need? But the writing is the editing. The draft of this book that I turned in is different than the book that I hope you'll get a chance to read.
Come back and just say, tell us your name and what you're studying and your question.
I'm studying political science and international relations, so I guess my question is more of journalism, like question in general, just current day. But due to like, not to get too political, but due to like Donald Trump cracking down on like law firms, suing certain news agencies, stuff like that, and then them succeeding to those demands, do you think that coupled with, especially now in like geopolitical conflicts like the Middle East, like Israel, Gaza, and a ton of like news organizations like Wall Street Journal and stuff having journalists leave, even like your news organization having people being either censored or silenced by publishers or editorial boards or stuff like that, which then having them leave the newspaper. Does that like send a chilling effect? Do you feel like as a journalist, it like affects you in like maybe your day-to-day operations or like how you move, or like maybe gives you pause about the future? And then also like when it comes to certain information, since I'm trying to get better at like finding better sources and stuff like that, and like finding decent, like good information, do you feel like when you look at journalism like across the world, when you look at like certain news agencies that are like either state sponsored or like funded by certain things, how do you like parse through that to find like accurate, well-sourced information?
So you're if I can restate, I think you're asking two questions, right? You're saying what is it? There's so much turmoil and crackdowns from the administration and a lot of aspects of American life, and then there's also this challenge in getting reliable information in the grander world frame. You know, it is a heck of a time to be alive, period. But it's also a wild time to be in this field. The AI challenge we were talking about earlier, when you type in, you know, what's happening in Gaza or something, AI will give you the summary at the top of the search page. It's likely our readers are not clicking through to the WSJ version of that story. They're reading the synopsis and are satisfied by that. And that is an existential crisis in our field, because we need our readers to come to us and rely on us and pay for our journalism. So I can do it. So I feel like we're in kind of there are multiple fronts that our field is under incredible pressure, as much as I've ever been through. And I do go out in the field quite a bit. And a colleague of mine went out to cover an event, and we do have kind of riot gear. I have riot gear in my kit that I need to take with me. And she was like, "How nuts is it that I'm taking a helmet and a gas mask and a jacket to cover an event, and the risk is our state, our state sponsored." We're in a wild time. But I think your second question about where do we get reliable information, that's where I'm trying to spend my time with my teenagers is, okay, TikTok says this, but where did that person get that information? Can we tease out, become more literate about where we're getting our news? And it's scary, because some of the AI generated videos look real, and people get punked with them all the time. So the answer is it is a heck of a time to be in this field, but I feel like what we do has never been more important.
I'm going to come back over here in a second, but let me ask, following up on that, do you worry too that, with technology and some of the change, we live in a world where almost everybody can be, or sometimes acts to be, a journalist?
Yeah.
So what is the difference between a real journalist and an everyday pretend journalist?
So I think that's such a fascinating question, because this Murdaugh case, a lot of the reason that it broke into the world was the result of citizen journalists, people that were podcasters. There's a subreddit on the Murdaugh family murders with 60,000 people, many of whom I've gotten to know because they're incredibly enterprising sleuths. They'll find spreadsheets of information or research property records and can help you recreate that work. So I think that citizen journalists, for lack of a better word, are doing incredible work, but the risk is that they're not trained, and they don't have the same obligation to fairness and making sure you can document everything that we do. And the corollary of that is all information is equal, right? So what citizen journalists are doing often is valued the same as what paid journalists are doing, even though it hasn't gone through the paid the full process. So it's good and bad. But I think that similar to the phone being good and bad, we wouldn't be here but for the phone, and this wouldn't have broken into the world in such a big way without
that technology.
without that voice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, did you experience anything like that yourself? Maybe it was your own mind trying to stop.
Sure.
Can you repeat?
Yes. So the question is, in fictions books, if there's a journalist after a story, there's normally an obstacle. There's somebody trying to block them from getting information. And was that the case in this nonfiction book?
That's a great question.
For sure, and that's a great question. I should tell you that the book is based on a very litigious law firm, right? And so there are a lot of people that don't want you to know what maybe that law firm is doing or members of that law firm is doing. And you also want to be very careful because I want to be right. But no, there were people that had a lot to lose, and there were also people that were afraid to talk. And surprisingly, that might have been the biggest obstacle, is that Hampton County is so insular. It has the least amount of migration. You know, Raleigh's changing every day. How many thousands of people move here a week? But it has the least migration in or out of any place in South Carolina. Everybody knows everybody. And a researcher I worked with who's from there, when I first got to know her, she said, "Well, Val, I should tell you, I'm not really from Hampton County. My family moved here in the 1950s. I was like, "You're from Hampton County if your family moved there in the 50s, but the families go way, way back." So I think one of the biggest obstacles was the community itself. There was so much fear that had been, you know, and Creighton Waters, the lead prosecutor, talked about that. He would interview a witness and then they would ghost him because you didn't know who you could trust.
Did that happen to you when you were talking with people and then all of a sudden they show up?
Oh, for sure. When I first went to Hampton County was in the summer of 21 when everything was on the cover of People magazine multiple times. And I think there was the 2020 already. And it's a town of like 2,000 people, Hampton. And there's 2 restaurants to eat lunch right in the little downtown. And there would be more reporters doing stand-up TV hits on the courthouse square than there were people walking around the downtown. So it really is exhausting and overwhelming to all of a sudden become the source of a major international news story. And people felt under siege. And I remember calling, it's a typical thing you would do if you go into a new community. I called all the members of the county council to introduce myself, ask them if they wanted to meet for a cup of coffee. Nobody called me back. And I realized later, when I went back 8 months later, one of the county council members was Maggie's best friend from aerobics. One of them owned the body shop where Paul's truck was left the night of the homicide. So
everybody's connected.
Everyone's connected to it. And understanding those relationships and having people in the community trust what I was trying to find out and then introduce me around. And that's another thing. We talked about the importance of relationships. Once 1 or 2 influential people, amateur historians or that are there, were kind of bought into what I was trying to find out, it helped a lot. But I would say the biggest obstacle was the community itself.
Any other questions? Did you have a question? No. Ron?
My name's Mariah. I work here. My question is, there's so many movies and shows about this, and there's the Netflix docuseries and the Hulu dramatization of this, and then your book, which goes far deeper than all the rest of them. But since you were there on the ground, is there anything that just completely shocked you or surprised you? Was there like a gotcha moment while you were there, where like you just saw the trial go like a different way? Does that make sense?
Yeah. The question is, this case has been so extensively covered in books and documentaries, but was there something in being there during the trial that just shocked you? And it was a courtroom. We were in there for 6 weeks every day, and it's not that big. It's way smaller than this room that we're in. And the first 100 people were the same every day. So it was the lawyers, the family, the media, loved ones, things like that. And then, so we got to know each other pretty well. And we had assigned seats, so I was always sitting 2 rows behind the prosecution. We weren't allowed to have electronics, so everything was a notebook. So I've, dozens of notebooks from that. And when I was going back working on the book, there were multiple times in the margin there, on the margin, that I would write, is this really happening right now? And the biggest one was when Alex Murdaugh took the stand. When Jim Griffin, the lawyer for the defense, stood up and said the defendant, Richard Alexander Murdaugh would like to take the stand, we were all like, gobsmacked, because it's such a high wire act. I mean, I'd been reporting it out, calling lawyers every night. Is he going to do it or he's not going to do it? And in the end, it was a gamble he felt like he had to take. Y'all remember the kennel video. There was a video that was taken on his son's phone that proved that he was down at the kennels at the exact moment that he said he wasn't. He was the only person that could address that. And he also thought, there's, in the back of that courtroom, there's a picture of his grandfather on the back wall. Alec had spoken at the dedication of that picture, and they had to remove it to keep from biasing the jury. That was the room where he grew up. He was in that courtroom for the first time when he was 3 years old. So he felt like he could convince, my people need to hear from me. Yeah. So that was the biggest one. And the other one I would say that was just unforgettable was, I don't think the verdict was particularly surprising. How quickly they came back, I think we knew that was coming. But the next morning, when Judge Clifton Newman, sentenced Alec, that was Old Testamental. That was extraordinary, and I encourage you to watch it on YouTube, because it is he knew the family. He knew Alec, he knew his father and his grandfather, and he was from a couple of counties north, and was sitting up on that bench, elevated above everybody, and speaking so slowly and clearly and deliberately, and it was the closest thing we get to earthly justice. So those were the two moments where I remember Mark Tinsley, who was a lawyer for the Beach family, a key character in the book. He told me later, he's like, I realized I wasn't breathing, and I looked around and I realized nobody else was either. So.
One last question.
My name is Ben. I'm doing the automotive certificate program. But I was just wondering, for those of us who wanted to buy a copy of the book, where would we go to look? Is it on Amazon?
Oh, that's so sweet.
Here's the good news. For everyone that's here, you get a free copy of the book, right, Mariah? So, autograph free copy, right over here.
And if you have time to come over and say hello, I'll personalize it for you. But I'd be honored if you read it. It's available on Amazon and all those places. But Quail Ridge and Wake Tech are providing these books for y'all, which is awesome.
Well, and thank you all to our great students for joining us, our faculty, staff that are here. This has been so wonderful to learn from Valerie Bauerlein. We're so proud of you too.
Oh my gosh, this is like a Raleigh person. Y'all can't imagine what it feels like to get to see the book there, and thinking that y'all might take it home and read it. And I hope you will. Thank you so much for having me.
You wore Wake Tech colors today, so you are honorary Wake Tech. You're welcome here anytime. We're so proud of you, and thank you for spending time with us. And thanks to all of you on the podcast who have joined us to hear this great story about The Devil at His Elbow. If you haven't read it, then get it. You will read it fast. It is a remarkable story, and love the way it was written. It is history, it is geography, but it is storytelling at its best. And thank you, Valerie, again for joining us here at Wake Tech, and everybody for spending your time with us this morning. It's been a great morning at Wake Tech. Thank you.
Thank y'all so much. Thank you.
I'm Joshua McKinney with your Wake Tech News Update. Wake Tech is being recognized among the best in the nation. The Aspen Institute has named Wake Tech one of the top 200 community colleges in the United States, making us eligible to compete for the $1 million Aspen Prize for Community College Excellence. The recognition highlights strong student outcomes, high completion rates, and Wake Tech's commitment to economic mobility and success beyond graduation. It's another national spotlight moment for North Carolina's largest community college. Pi Theta Kappa has inducted 112 new members. It's one of the largest classes in chapter history. Students must maintain a 3.5 GPA or higher to join. Chapter President Megan Turner says she plans to continue her educational journey at UNC Chapel Hill to study neuroscience. The ceremony also honored longtime advisor Rhonda Thomason, for her leadership and service. A proud milestone for Wake Tech student scholars and mentors alike. Wake Tech students are turning the page to excellence. 28 students were inducted into Sigma Kappa Delta, the National English Honor Society, recognizing academic achievement in literature and writing. Members support tutoring, community service projects, and participate in regional and national conferences. This, once again, is a shining example of students enriching learning and leadership at Wake Tech. A new academic leader is helping shape the future of instruction at Wake Tech. Dr. John Bakken has been named the college's first Associate Vice President of Academic Affairs. A 20-year Wake Tech veteran, Bakken will help advance the REACH and Rally 2.0 strategic plan, supporting curriculum development, instructional innovation, and student success. His appointment marks another step forward in strengthening Wake Tech's academic leadership. Wake Tech welcomes a brand new leader in communications and marketing. We welcome Lisa Marie Farrell, who has joined the college as Vice President of Communications and Marketing. Farrell brings extensive experience from NC State University and Lenovo. At Wake Tech, she will lead public relations, digital strategy, storytelling, and brand engagement to amplify the college's mission and community impact. A strong addition to Wake Tech's leadership team. And finally, a Wake Tech graduate is stepping into a major cybersecurity opportunity. Wake Tech graduate Jennifer Medina has been selected as one of 10 cybersecurity interns in the North Carolina Department of Information Technology's inaugural internship program. She earned the position after completing Wake Tech's 33-week Sentinel Cybersecurity Bootcamp, funded by the National Science Foundation and developed with industry partners. Medina says the program opened the door to a new career and prepared her for hands-on security work. A proud achievement and another example of Wake Tech shaping North Carolina's cybersecurity workforce. And that's your Wake Tech News Update. I'm Joshua McKinney.
Thank you for listening to the We Are Wake Tech podcast. Join us next month for more insightful conversations about the programs and people of Wake Tech and how the college changes lives every day. Be sure to subscribe to your favorite podcast app to have each episode delivered right to your computer or mobile device. For more, find us at podcast.waketech.edu. To learn more about Wake Tech's exceptional educational opportunities, visit waketech.edu.